Welcome to the Avail podcast, where we dig deep and talk about the art of leadership. My name is Virgil Sierra, and today we're sitting down with Phil Klein. Phil is a leader of leaders and the founder of Focus 412, an organization dedicated to partnering with leaders to develop healthy staff, structure, and systems to build the body of Christ. Today, we'll discuss topics such as leadership development, practical systems and structures, and organizational health. So, buckle up your leadership seatbelts and let's get started. Hey, everybody. We are back for another episode of the Avail podcast, and I am privileged and honored to be sitting with a good friend, an amazing leader who's going to bring some very insightful conversation to the table today. I am sitting with none other than Phil Klein. Phil, it's so good to have you here on the Avail podcast. How you feeling, my friend?
I'm great, Virgil. Pastor, I love you. You always bring the fun. You always make me feel like I've just gotten 10 years younger. So I'm excited about this.
Yes, sir. Hey, here on the Avail podcast, our aim is to put practical, relevant leadership resources in the hands of leaders. And I know that this conversation with you is going to do just that. You've been such a blessing to me, Phil. Can I say, hearing you, watching you, learning from you at many conferences throughout the last couple of years, I have been equipped by you and your team in ways that, I can't even express how amazing that is. So I want to just take advantage and just thank you for the role that you play for so many pastors and church leaders. And I can't wait to see all that the Lord is going to continue doing through you.
Oh, man. It's been an honor, and I love seeing your leadership happen and the people you're trying to serve, and it's been amazing. I love our relationship, and appreciate you having me.
Yes, sir. I know that when you and I talked in preparation for this podcast, you mentioned a little bit about just maybe some gratitude for Dr. Sam Chand. Here in the Avail family, Dr. Sam Chand has really set the tone in saying, "Hey, team, we want to just build a Christian leadership brand that's actually going to help leaders." And maybe you want to take a moment or two to just talk about that.
Thank you. Yeah, like I was sharing with you the other day, I just Sam has paved the way for people like me to be able to do what I do, and really just created such a legacy of helping leaders. And really back when he started doing all this, and just this notion of coaching and consulting and raising people up and looking at their issues from a different angle, is just stuff that wasn't something that happened in the church, if you will. And so I feel a great debt of gratitude. Not literally, I mean this seriously. Like I probably wouldn't be able to do what I do if he hadn't. I kind of feel like I stand on his shoulders, if you will. I love his heart, and almost everywhere I go, and every great leader I've worked with mentions him somewhere in their story, that he came in, and it's usually some time where there was a crisis of leadership or a big decision or something weighing on him, and he just came in and started speaking truth into it. Just his mind and his heart that work together. It's pretty crazy. So yeah, I'm extremely grateful and love all that he and Avail and you and the team are all doing to help leaders. It's what I'm about as well.
Yeah, I love that. I think so many of us can just say a few things of how people that have gone before us have made a difference, including Dr. Sam Chand. All right, Phil, I'm looking forward to this conversation. Now, you lead this important organization that is Focus 412. I'd like before we get into the conversation of, kind of leadership and church systems and structures, can you maybe just share a couple minutes about yourself, who you are, where you come from, what you're doing? That way our Avail audience can get an idea of who Phil Klein is.
Well, thanks. So I would say it this way. I have an amazing wife, Grace. I have two daughters, Paige and Felicia, and a great son-in-law, Brad, that just kind of help keep me straight. And we all kind of do ministry together. So it's a great blessing that I have a great family. And The short of it is this, because when you get as old as I am, you got a long story to tell. So I'll sum it up. Not to sound trite, but I love God and I love the church. My lane in the church has always been raising up leaders. I had a pretty long, about a 35-year corporate career. I worked for Time Warner and a bunch of big entertainment companies, and had some big operating roles and things like that, and learned a lot and really had a passion for leadership. Then God got a hold of my heart. I stumbled into this church called Little Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, called Elevation Church. And there was this young pastor popping off about leadership on the stage. And I was just so taken. It was almost like he put words and talked about a vision, and I was witnessing a church do things that I thought was what the church was about, but I hadn't necessarily seen that, especially from a leadership perspective. And so that inspired my heart. I got involved, and not long after was asked to be on the executive team. So I got to really see two worlds. I got to see my corporate world for 35 years. Then I was deeply embedded in one of the fastest growing churches in the country, and just being led differently and all those circumstances. I'm part of a great church now, amazing church. My pastor, Chris Hodges, and Church of the Highlands, Grace and I and our family are thrilled and grateful to be a part. But I would just describe it that I've kind of led two lives. I was in Egypt, and then I came to the promised land, and I've really used every day the things that I learned there. But I also had to understand the church. And I don't think you can understand the church unless you've been deeply, involved in it. So now God called me to help really take that. And I'm really an extension of Church of the Highlands and Highlands College, but Focus 412, really, I like to say that Highlands is the aircraft carrier, and we're the F-16. We can go places and do things with people. So that gives me, I feel like I have the most blessed life, because I get to do what I was born to do with the people I was born into. So I went from CEOs being my heroes to now pastors. Pastors are really my heroes, and I literally was born to serve them. So that's why I love you so much, and Sam, and so that's kind of a nutshell. And I think mostly about organizational development, leadership development, how to really, we talk a lot about how to lead people, but you have to lead an organization. So that's kind of what I think about the most.
I love that. That's a great description. I think I can't wait to see, and I'm going to throw this at you, not to talk about it now, but for you to pray about and consider. But I think that there's an army of men and women who are called to the same thing you're called to. Just they haven't seen too many examples, and they haven't awoken to that. So I'm going to pray that the Lord would use you as a voice to rise, kind of lift up and raise up some of those people to come side by side with pastors and churches. I'm praying for that, Phil. I'm praying for that. All right. So I want to talk a little bit. I want to kind of start off a little bit on the whole kind of leadership development. I know this is important. You just mentioned how important this is. You talk about the archaeologist and architect paradigm, right? Which I had never heard that take on it. The archaeologist architect's paradigm when it comes to leadership development. Can you unravel that for us?
Yeah, if you think about it, we have two lives as a leader, if you will. We've got our day-to-day grind, getting things done, and then we also have developing people. And the tyranny, the urgent, is kind of that the thing that pulls at us, the thing that won't rest and comes after us and sucks us in, is the day-to-day, which is important, getting stuff done. Leaders, build relationships and get results. So results are important, but I think the piece that you've got to go looking for, if you will, which is the archaeologist piece of it. Archaeologists are fascinated by what's in the ground that they haven't unearthed yet, right? So I see teams and people as this vast earth of it's a gold mine, and the gold is just under the surface. So it's really about the concept of to be a great leader, you have to be a developer of leaders, because you'll never accomplish big things without a great team. And it's not about a team that's just going to help you do what you got to do. It's really that you're all pulling together around a vision
Mm.
and trying to drive a vision, a movement. Many of the things we're involved in really are movements. But at the end of the day, so the archaeologist side is how am I going to see myself as somebody who sees things in people, that what has God installed in someone and what can I pull out? So it's the discoverer, developer. I love how this picture of like, how well you can see this, but like when the archaeologist gets what they call a find,
Mm-hmm.
and they, let's say it's a 2,000-year-old vase, and the first thing they do is, they chip away the big stuff, and then they pull it up, and they've got those little brushes, and they're literally peeling away the layers to kind of see what's there, and then what use does that thing have? What does it inform us? What does it tell us? The flip side of that is archaeologist is really taking that, or excuse me, architect is taking what you find and saying, okay, I'm a builder. I need to build a system, put this into use. It's how do we use this to drive the vision forward? Then it's all the building pieces of structure and scaling stuff, and it's kind of all important. So that's the general paradigm.
That's cool. Now I have a question, just I guess chipping into what you just said there, pun intended. Where do you find that? I mean, do you think pastors and church leaders, from your kind of assessment, and do you think they're a little better at the archaeologist part? Do you think they're a little bit better at the architect part? Like, you know what I mean? When you see that dynamic.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think it's based on decades sometimes in the church, and not to get too philosophical, but I think there's been periods in the church where the leaders God brought, or the leaders we became, were different. There were teachers. I think where we're at today with most of the leaders I meet in the current church, they're much more entrepreneurial. They're much more taken ground and visionary and great communicators. And that usually lends itself to more of the architect than the archaeologist. So I think it's we all are given both passions and skill sets. And I think my skill set my focus has always been, I'm kind of a defender of the developer, if you will, just because it's such a important part. But I also think we're built in different ways. I may naturally be a developer encourager versus a builder challenger. I think that's okay. We just have to understand that it's kind of like our faith. There are certain tenets of our faith that are not that we don't get to choose whether we do them or not. Whether it's loving people, you don't get to choose. God says we're. So I think you may not be a great natural developer, but I think you have to develop a skill set and/or gather around you people that are good developers to make sure that component is, but I think in today's world, I spend a lot more time being concerned about the development side of it versus architects. We have a lot of great builders, it seems like, which is a good thing to have. But if you start kind of putting floors on the building you're building, and you haven't done enough development of the footings or the foundation, at some point you end up with kind of the Leaning Tower of Pisa at some point. And it doesn't show up. It's insidious. It doesn't show up early on in your ministry or in your leadership or in your organization, your church. It shows up later. But unfortunately, when it shows up, meaning that void of development, it shows up in not having enough leaders, so you can't go as fast as you were. Things start to break. And the most difficult thing that really is on my heart, the reason I'm so passionate with people, is that when that happens, there's not a quick fix, because you can't microwave leaders. If you needed a new building tomorrow, and it's not that this easy, but if you needed a new building because you could launch another campus, let's say, if somebody gave you $20 million, you could launch a campus if you found an existing building in a week. You can't, if you have a crisis of leadership, a void of leadership, that could take you 5 years to catch up. And so I'm kind of the evangelist of, don't wait till that time, because if you call me then and say, what do I do, Phil? Like, there's no quick fixes at that point.
Yeah, something that Sam Chan teaches a lot is a lot of times people want to get ahead to step C, D, and E, putting the roof on the house, but you don't have a solid foundation or even walls. And it sounds like that's what you're talking about. And I would say, kind of from my perspective and experience, sometimes it seems like that development part might take longer, and so we kind of want to skip it, right? Or unearthing something and really seeing what we got. It takes not only intentionality, but it actually takes time, and we want to be so far ahead that maybe that's the price we're not willing to pay sometimes.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think it's again, back to depending on how you're wired. Some people get generally excited about it, but I think it feels. It doesn't, it's a deceptive thing. It feels like when you're in the middle of an opportunity, especially if it's an opportunity-based thing, you've got this vision, you've got this ability, you have people that want more of it, is to just give them more and to scale it up, because it seems selfish sometimes. It seems unwise to say, I really need to do this cautiously is not the right word, but I need to do this incrementally. And, there's a different feeling when you see a structure quickly go up than there is when you're just, a quick story. I was, when I was in my previous life in New York, looking out, I was in a skyscraper, if you will, my office, and looking out across the street was a vacant lot. And one day some guys showed up with a bunch of heavy equipment, and they were out there, I'm not kidding, for 6 months. Every day I would hear this noise. It was horrible trying to get work done, but there was all this noise and all this activity and all these people. And I literally for 6 months saw nothing coming out of the ground. And it's because they were driving these big pilings down into the ground. And there's this feeling as a leader when you're doing all this development work that like, we are not getting anywhere. Nothing is happening versus, and hear my heart. I love all you pastors, but like what happens sometimes is I don't feel something is happening. And so I'm going to go do a big event and drive, like I'm going to get 500 people to show up to an event, because that's going to feel like we're doing something. Right. And sometimes events are the best thing you could ever do. But I think sometimes we look for other things to try to make it feel like there's energy, because I like I said, I was frustrated. Like I wanted to see a building. I've never seen a skyscraper get built. And I'm like a little kid waiting for it to come up. And finally the first part of steel started coming up. And guess what? Then the thing shot up. Like it seemed like 2 weeks they had the framework up, but it was forever that I could literally not see a thing. So I think it's very difficult. It takes discipline, takes maturity, and it takes, I think, knowing you have to focus on the good things. God's promises, quite frankly, the things that he's promised you will come to pass. You don't have to try to synthesize them by getting visible things to happen before you've really built the foundation.
Yeah, that's really good. You made a comment that I think on the same note. Can you unpack a little bit? Leadership is like a superhero. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's I think with development is the discovery process, like we said. I think we try to make development into something that I'm bringing something and I'm installing it in you. God doesn't make anything void. So those things are inside of me. I might not even know what they are. You may need to call them out. I may have had some experience. So here's the superpower part is, when I think, is it Marvel or one of those X-Men or Marvel, one of the things where they all the kids that have superpowers live in this like college for superheroes, and they're young and they're inexperienced, and like if their superpower is that their eyes are like lasers, they get upset about something and look at a coffee table and all of a sudden it starts on fire and burns the room down. It's like, that's the beginnings of something that's very good. It's something God put in you. You just have to discover what the balcony of that strength looks like. And again, I think it's easier than we make it sometimes, because the superpowers exist. We know through StrengthsFinder and Myers-Briggs and Enneagram that we are all built differently. We're all given special gifts. And quite frankly, some of that we can do an assessment and understand already what your superpowers are. Then it's wrapping the knowledge, studying that super strength,
Mm-hmm.
and applying it. Development's nothing more than understanding and practicing, understanding more and practicing more. It's what we call building a skill, which is nothing more than learning more about it, but then actually getting in the gym and working out, if you will.
I love that. Some of us in the church world might call some of those spiritual giftings, right?
Yeah.
Some of them might be, just natural abilities and talents that get redeemed, and we start to develop those and study them and watch others. I love this. I want to kind of segue, staying on the same kind of leadership vibe and wavelength here, but I want to segue a little bit into just practical leadership for pastors and ministry leaders. Phil, I think one of the things that you do so well, along with your team at Focus 412, is that you help churches, both younger, new church plants and young churches, as well as, established, well-established, long been there a long time churches. You help many churches with systems and structures. Can you talk to us just a little bit on the practical side of things? How important systems and structures are? Maybe even delve in a little bit into what are some common mistakes that you just see in regards to systems and structures and the lack thereof, and what do we as church leaders, pastors, what do we need to start paying attention more to in all of this systems and structures?
Yeah. I mean, I think systems and structures are important too. I always see it kind of in the dynamic of, you've got people, so you need people that are called to a vision. You have culture, which is a framework for them to work within. It's how they relate to each other. It's our shared agreement of how we're going to live together on this, on this journey, on this mission. You've got systems, which are the processes in which we're going to do the things we know we need to do. And we need to have, lines on the field, if you will. The processes are nothing more than lines on a football field. If you and I went out with some buddies and had a ball and we're like, hey, let's play, let's just go out and have fun, it would be miserable if we just had a ball and no idea what we were really doing, but we're just like, let's just kind of do something with this ball. We don't want any rules or restrictions, meaning systems and structure. We don't need any of that stuff, because we want the freedom of just us and a ball and a great game that's going to be the best game. It would be miserable. We'd be bumped. We wouldn't know exactly what we're doing. Now, if we drew some simple lines on the field, which is the structure, and then we prescribed how we're going to kind of have that fun we're getting ready to do, which are the systems, we would have an amazing experience that would have unlimited freedom within the lines. Systems and structures enable freedom because they've already pre-described how we're going to do things, which means we get the joy of actually doing them together, and we don't have all these collisions and conflicts in the middle. So I think it's really, I think there's still this prevailing thought in the church. And again, I don't want to overgeneralize, but I think it's this idea that their systems and structures are restrictive.
Right.
They're bureaucratic, they're corporate, if you will. And we're the church. We're just dynamic. And I always say, I feel like Odell Beckham Jr. is pretty dynamic, and he plays on a field with, and so I think I see it that way. Like the greatest performances are always on a field or a stage. They're not out just in the middle of something just happening. So I think for us to get the best, we need those things. And I think we probably err on the side of not having enough understanding of the value of systems and structures, and instead of just seeing the restriction of them.
Yeah, the way you put that is pretty insightful, because our natural tendency is to think, oh, wait, more, lines and rules, that's going to inhibit me. Whereas you said those are what bring us the freedom. And I think that's huge, especially for, I think not only for, but sometimes kind of old school mentality, pastors and preachers and leaders, although, not limited to them, but sometimes maybe that's the way we've always done it, or, that's the flow in our denomination, or, and I think it's important to talk about that. I mean, what are some of the, what are some of the obstacles you notice as you work with churches, regardless of, of what style or, where the church, but just kind of common patterns in the area of systems and structures that you say, man, if they just paid attention to this, it would make such a difference. You don't want to miss this month at Avail, or any month for that matter. Why? Because each month, the Avail Online Leadership Series happens, a live call with leaders from around the world who have a passion for God and key leadership insights to impart to you. Interact with authors, pastors, and influencers from every industry. And the best part, it's free. To get registered right now, head over to theartofleadership.com. What are you waiting for?
Yeah, I think here's the biggest one. I think that we feel like, and I mean the greater we as leaders sometimes feel, especially in the church, like because of scale, meaning if I'm just starting my church, if I'm planting a church, the systems and structure, like an organizational chart and structure, understanding who does what and what those relationships are, that's something you do later when you're big and you need to do it. That's for larger organizations, larger things, more mature things, that in the beginning, it's just more like a scrum because there's only really 6 or 8 of us as leaders. And I think here's what happens is, I think that the time to do that is before when you need it now, but you'll need it even more later. And when people don't have a picture of where you're going, here's what happens in a church context is, a group of 6 or 8 people that are committed and all in start a church. And day one, everybody's, and I'll use this term, everybody's kind of informally on the lead team, right? Because there's one team. There's the pastor and the pastor's buddies and friends and spouses and all that stuff. And then guess what? 5 years later, one of those 8 people is the executive pastor. One of those people might be running the load in and load out team at the portable campus. Those are very different levels of roles. They're both super important, but typically what's happened is there's some relational breaks that happen and resentment and confusion because I used to serve side by side with the pastor, and now I'm doing something very different. And then somebody else that did that is still side by side with the pastor, and I feel either less than or resentment. And it's because there was no definition up front to say, today we have roles and we have levels, but they're just compressed into, and this is where we're going, and this is kind of where you're headed. And it's not a limiter. It's based on your capacity, based on your skill set. And this is your role. And here's where we're going to go in 18 months and then 18 months after that. And I think that prevents a lot of the things that the conflict and breaks, and it gives clarity. You just need clarity for the future, and it doesn't matter if you're big or small. So I think some of the systems and structures, we wait till we need them, and by the time we need them, we're now in pretty difficult circumstances versus just build for where you're going, not for where you are, I guess that's
good
thing. And not 5 years from now, but 18 months from now.
Sure.
Yeah. So I have an expression that scale breaks everything, meaning when we're doing something, what people need will never change. How you get it to them or how we do it will always be ever changing as we scale the size and complexity of our organizations. So we're not changing what we do or what they need. It's how we do it that needs to change. Because whether you're having lunch if I said, let's have lunch, if it was you and I, let's say, let's if we were in the same building, I'd say, let's go have lunch. You and I would say, hey, where do we want to go? Let's walk across the street to lunch. We'd have lunch, we'd have fellowship, and we'd go home. That's lunch. If I said, let's have lunch with 600 people, that's an example of scale breaks everything, because the the invite for the scale of me and you was me saying, let's have lunch, and you saying, yeah, let's do that. If we're going to invite 600 people, we need probably some kind of a Eventbrite or an email system, or and when we said, hey, let's go across the street, if you had 600 people, you probably have to plan 3 months ahead to get a venue for lunch for six. And so my point is the time frame changes in which you start to plan, the way you go about it changes. But my argument is it's just lunch, right? And it's like, well, hey, it's just lunch. And so I call it scaling. We have to be thinking of the next level of scale. It's not what I need now. It's what do I need 18 months from now from a system structure and, quite frankly, people leadership perspective. And if I'm building for that now, I'm going to be good once I get there.
I love that. In a second, we're going to talk a little bit about something that you're passionate about, which is organizational health and church health, for that matter, leadership health. I guess before we go there, just I don't know, this question may or may not make sense, right? But we've talked about how small churches or brand new churches and then bigger churches that are established, they might have some differences, and at the same time, they might have some similarities. And there could be smaller churches that have a better structure than bigger established churches. Here's the question: if we had to, in 3 minutes, share with maybe a young pastor of a new church, and they don't have any idea about system structures, what is just kind of a simple, hey, I recommend you thinking about this simple kind of pattern or framework? What
Yeah.
and you only had a couple minutes with them. What would you say?
Yeah. I would say always, I would say what's important is people need to understand what their role is, and they need to understand the greater structure that their role lies in. Meaning, I have to know what I'm tasked to do, what my bumpers are, my responsibilities are, and then I also need to know the context in which I'm placed and what happens around me. And I think that's probably the biggest thing we see is it's kind of a divide and conquer mentality of like, you're amazing, I trust you, go make these things happen. I think we underestimate, especially at a small scale, that we still have to have clear understanding of how our role nests in the greater picture, whether it be level, whether it be scope of responsibilities. And I think literally, and I know this sounds weird, but organizational structure is the thing that people are the most confused about, especially at a smaller scale. And then it just gets worse over time. So I think it's very difficult, because if you go to a great church like mine or yours, I mean, like the scale is different. So it's like trying to extrapolate a church that has 400 people on staff and say, what should my church look like that I have 12 people on the leadership team? It's very different. So I think, I think that's where ARC and other, places, there's some great tools out there to kind of get with somebody who understands at that level of scale what it looks like. But I think focus on roles and responsibilities and you'll never go wrong. There's a lot of other stuff, but I think that's the thing that we kind of presume and don't typically spend enough time with.
Yeah, that's good. So I'm hearing the importance of really envisioning what's the structure that you want your organization to look like, not just where you are now, because there might be no structure, but where you want to go, so that as you move forward, you can start knowing where you're headed towards, and then having clarity in those key roles, responsibilities, key oversight with the key people on your team. This is going to help kind of get a head start for people that are kind of in those beginning.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good. I was going to say that this is something that with Focus 412, this is something that you guys do for churches, right?
Yeah, we call it the what's interesting. What's interesting is when I first got a heart to go out and do this in this form, meaning 8 years ago when God said, go out and help leaders build their organizations. I never heard build an organization. I heard the opposite. Like God said, do not build something. One of our values to this day is we do your thing, not our thing. We don't have a thing. We want help you with your thing. And that's what we do. But so here's what happened is I went out and I thought I was going to evangelize the leadership pipeline because I'm a leadership pipeline guy. And I did that for about a year as I was, building the process and figuring it out. And what we discovered is those pipelines did not last. And the reason they didn't last was because some of the essential components of a healthy organization weren't there. So it was like this. Have you ever seen somebody at the gym? I don't want to pick on anybody, but it's like that guy or gal at the gym that's got huge arms, like they got these big guns, and then they got like a stick body and their legs are this big around, right? And it's just like they've been doing a lot of work on their arms, right? But their frame doesn't really support that. And it was a great disappointment, and I fought it, but God showed me that it's like these organizations can't support a leadership pipeline because they don't have the essential infrastructure, the systems, the structure, and the leader. So what we do is we pivoted at 12 months really and said, let's go through all of the essential things that have to be in place. So that's what we do. It's everything from mission, vision, values to expectations, communication, decision-making, all those things, because if they're not in place, and a leadership pipeline is, if you will, is an advanced thing, and it takes support. So it's what we help with now is what we call the essentials of a healthy organization, and it falls in basically staff, systems, and structure. And so that's we get up every day thinking about that and trying to be better at helping people do that.
Yeah, that's good. I know something on your heart you've shared with me is just organizational health. Can you share some thoughts just because of kind of what's on your heart, what you're seeing, what you're praying for, what you're trying to help with?
Yeah. I mean, I always have to be careful when I talk about this because I'm so passionate, and I'm a 1 in the Enneagram. So, we have to live into our values, right? And it's all about the integrity is the distance between your value and your behavior, right? So you got to close that gap. And I think healthy churches is so important, and healthy teams. And I think there's a lot of work we need to do. I think during COVID, we found out that it's kind of a striking thing. And I think a lot of people have talked about the fact that we lost some of our leaders. And I'm not just talking about on staff. I mean, volunteer leaders and, basically, 30 million people quit their jobs. And I think, I'm not sure that we looked any different in the church. And I think you could put a lot of labels on that, but I would say it's a crisis of leadership in a way that what we didn't get, what we discovered that we didn't give them. And I'm including myself in this. Mm-hmm. I'm not pointing my finger, is that we found out that we weren't really developing individuals at a level of what I would call discipleship and leadership, which I see as the same thing, if you will. I know that theologically that discipleship is a spiritual thing, but that's part of being a leader. It's my depth of leading in character and spirit. And I think what we found is they were died to the vision. They were on the mission, but they didn't have the tools to face the storm in their own life when there wasn't all the systems in place. The systems kind of weren't there. My individual leadership is not what everything leans on. And I think it's a rally cry to us to say in our model going forward, and our model always needs to be innovated. We have to come up with better, more systematic, more committed ways to, this isn't a plug for development, but it comes right back to love people is to invest in them and believe in them. They will do great things. It's not trying to get them to do the task. That creates leadership, which means I can lead my family. I can weather the storm. And I think health comes from developing people and really not, I think we put too much emphasis sometimes on where we're going versus if we really, the best companies, organizations, and churches in the world focus on the team, which means they really focus on, in the corporate world, their customers, and the church, the people we're trying to serve. So it's a cycle, and I'm just real passionate about making sure that next time a storm hits, that we're more prepared and more healthy. Because I think we were, the waves came in and filled our bucket up, and our bucket was already half full already, I think. So I think that's a lesson learned, and I think we're talking about a lot of ways that we can continue to be innovative and still accomplish what we're trying to accomplish, but stay healthy, because it's a long play, right? We all need, we'll all face God one of those days, and I don't know that He's going to make a big list of our tasks and show us things on our checklist that didn't get done. So I think it is about spreading the church and loving people, and that gets best done when we're able to do that for a long time. So
that's good. What as we head to the final stretch here, Phil, what would you say are some qualities and characteristics specifically of the leaders in organizations and churches where you're seeing health? Spiritual health, organizational health, church culture, like a healthy church culture. What are some things that stand out as you think about that concept?
Yeah. I think something all great leaders that I've ever worked with have is they all have incredibly, ridiculously high standards, right? And so and I put that on the table because herein lies the problem. That's a good thing. And if it wasn't there, we wouldn't have these things, we wouldn't have churches that just literally, a leader puts a stake in the ground and says, I'm doing that right here. And these are the, and pull something out of the ground. So it's a good thing. It's how you manage to those standards. If you see your team as a means to meeting your standards, then I think you've got some tough road ahead, and you're going to burn through a lot of people. I think if the great leaders I know understand that building those high standards into the people that they're loving and leading is a great benefit to their lives, because it creates this cycle of improving their lives, their leadership, which, rises all, the rising tide lifts all, all boats. So I think it starts with, they all have incredibly high standards and a vision. And it's whether you see your team as a way for you all to fulfill the vision God's given you, or whether you see it as getting a group of people that can help you fulfill the vision. And I think that's a subtle difference, but there's a big difference between a group of people that's going to help you fulfill your vision versus help fulfill a vision. And that, most of them see themselves, they don't necessarily always operate that way because you're called to a higher level and you're leading people. But I think it's, are you on the team, or is the team a function of what you need a team to accomplish, what you need to accomplish? And that's the great deception that the devil loves to put on great leaders, is it becomes, my team is a mechanism to accomplish my goals, because I'm a leader and I'm supposed to accomplish a lot. So hopefully that's not too personal, when it comes to sound like I'm being critical of people, but it's how the devil works in our leadership. And we see every day, another person that started, that thought it was about the great gift that they were given, that they were supposed to do something with, versus, that gift was given to pour into the people that are with you, so everybody can pour into the people that are around you. And I mean, I see that in your, I just want to say this. Well, I see that in your heart and your leadership. And that's all I've, seen from you, is just like, you're always, I don't know that I've ever seen you that you haven't, first question from you is always like, how are you doing? What's going on with you? How's Focus 412? You're never like, and you meet people that it's like 2 seconds in, they're excited and you get excited for them, but they're all about the thing they're doing, and everything comes back to the thing they're doing. And I think that's the same paradigm in leading a team. It's like, what's going on with them? What are they thinking about? what are their dreams? And their dreams are all common to yours because they're part of your vision. But don't be afraid to turn it around. And I see that in your heart and your leadership and your demeanor. And I think you're a good example of you're always helping somebody else. And I think leaders help other people, even if you're a monster, like you got a huge organization or church. Your job is always still to figure out what everybody else needs.
That's good. That's good, Phil. I appreciate that. That means a lot to me. Man, this has been really good. I could stay here personally another 2 episodes, another 2 hours and talk about this stuff, which is so helpful. Maybe we'll plan a round 2 in the future. This is really good. Can I just shoot a couple of quick answer, just whatever comes to your mind, questions? You can even pass if you have to. Here's the first one. Just random thoughts here. What is a hobby, something you just enjoy doing? Phil Klein.
Golf. I love to golf, but I don't get too much because I love leadership development more. So I'm a workaholic, but it's what I love to do. So yeah, I love play golf. Grace and I've been trying to play more. So I love golf.
All right. Is there a hidden talent that most people don't know about?
Wow. Yeah. I'm a really good improv comic.
Ooh.
Not comic, scratch comic. I'm good at improv, situational.
Hits.
Yeah, like two people. It's like you see on TV. 2 people standing there. Somebody says, "Here's the scene. Here's what it is. One, you're the dad. You're the son. He just came home after getting pulled out of jail. Ready, set, go." I would be the last person because as you've already seen, I'm a processor and kind of a deep thinker. And I thought I'd hate it. I love it, and I'm pretty good at it.
Would you? So you must have been a fan of the "Whose Line Is It Anyway" kind of shows.
Yeah. Terrifies me, but there's some thrill. It's like jumping out of an airplane, and I've got to do it a couple times with some people that actually like Second City type thing, not them specifically, but professional actors. And I thought this is going to be a disaster, but it was amazing.
Cool. Well, maybe we can do that because I love improv too. We can do that in the future. All right, here's another question. What makes you laugh about church and leadership?
Oh gosh. Maybe skinny jeans. I don't know. I try to find a sense of humor. Sometimes I'm such a serious guy that it's I lament more than I laugh. But I think sometimes it's just we can sometimes take ourselves too seriously, and but I don't have a good one for that. I'm just trying to. Yeah, I'll be processing that one later.
We can stick with skinny jeans. That's good. Okay, last one. What breaks your heart right now for leaders in the church?
Oh gosh, I think what breaks my heart right now, to be totally honest, is I feel like we've got to do a reset. That character always has to be greater than your gift or your competency. And I think what we've seen of late is people that break my heart because I love them, that have fallen because their gift or their opportunities is a better way to say it, got out ahead of their character. And it didn't mean that they didn't have one. It's just that it outstripped it. And I think every one of the failures we've seen in the church in the last 10 years can go back to that paradigm. Mm. And I think there's great people out there that are some voices that are starting to speak to it. And I don't speak eloquently to it, but I am incredibly passionate about it. Because it's like your gift is going to get you in the room. Your character is going to keep you in the room or keep you on the platform. And it's a bad thing when you have a lot of people that join in on something and then it all blows up because it went too fast for that to happen. And so I'm old school. I believe like you gotta do the work inside first. And I think I'm praying every day, literally. Grace and I pray about that. And I know God will heal us of that, but it's like there's just a lot of that out there right now. And I think the world has helped us get where we are because not a lot of emphasis on that. It's just like it's how good your social media looks and what people perceive of you. Sure. Doesn't have anything to do with what's really happening inside. So it's all, like you used to use the term before, it's old school. It's just going back to, being a farmer, what happens to your crops is a level of your work and your dedication versus just what you could create in a PowerPoint slide or, in a minute. Like it takes some time to build that stuff, if you will.
Yeah, that's good. Phil, if there are pastors, church leaders who are leaning in and interested, and they want to know how Focus 412, your organization, can help them and their churches, their staff teams, how can they reach out and find you?
Really just we have a website that kind of gives folks an idea of what we do and gives them a look at the team. We have a great team. It's really not about me. It's about the team. So it's focus412.com, and it's 412. So it's Focus 412. Ephesians 412 is where the name comes from. And just reach out. We would love to hear from you. Reach out, and we'd love to talk to people, but really just we're not looking to sell anything or promote anything. It's really just if people need help, we'd love to help them.
Yeah, I want you guys to listen, leaders, pastors, executive pastors. If you haven't looked into Focus 412 with Phil Klein and his team, I highly, highly recommend it for all things staff, systems, structures, just the leadership and the growth and the, developing something, not only for now, but for the future. Focus 412, their top rank. I really highly recommend it. Focus412.com is the website. Phil, one thing we like to do with our leaders is always encourage them to lean into resources like the Avail Journal. I mean, would you agree that having resources for leaders reading up is something that's so important?
Yeah, and that's such a great resource. I read it. It's beautiful. It's informative. It's deep. And I mean that. It's like it's a pleasure to learn through that. And I've seen some great stuff. I've actually seen you in there a time or two. But no, it is an amazing resource, and I love it. I have a copy on my desk.
Yeah, all Avail listeners and viewers, just want to let you know, if you haven't done so yet, you can access your free annual subscription of the Avail Journal by going to availjournal.com. We have enriching articles and resources by multiculturally diverse, multi-generationally diverse, contributors, pastors, leaders, people that are making an impact in the community, in the church, in ministry. If you haven't done so, you got to do this, availjournal.com. Phil, before we wrap things up, just a final nugget that you want to leave on leaders' hearts today.
I'll do this one. There's a phrase we use in coaching, and it's unspoken expectations are premeditated resentment. And I would just say we've talked a lot about, people working with people, and expectations are important. It's important for us as people, whether it's me to you, me to my team, that we make very clear our expectations of each other and then build great relationships on top of that. And grow our churches and reach more people. So I think if we focus on relationship, we're going to get a lot of results, and it starts with expectations.
Great word. Hey, everybody, man, what a great conversation here with Phil Klein. Phil, I really appreciate this. Just want to mention on behalf of the Avail team, on behalf of Dr. Sam Chand, Martijn Van Tilborg, everybody behind the Avail team, we thank you, we honor you, and we bless you for what you've already done, what you're doing, but what I know that you and your family and your team are going to continue to do in equipping the church. We're so proud of you. We're so thankful for you.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for you and the whole team and Sam.
Hey, everybody. I hope you've gotten a lot out of this. Remember, Focus 412, Focus412.com. That's the website where you can find out more about Phil, his team, and how their organization can help your organization. They can help your church grow beyond what you can imagine. What a great conversation. Be encouraged. Be blessed. Hey, everybody. We'll catch you next time right here on the Avail Podcast. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Avail Podcast. We hope we got you leaning in with this conversation with Phil Klein. Remember, you can connect with Phil and his team by going to focus412.com. For more leadership resources, check us out at theartofleadership.com. And make sure to claim your free annual subscription of the Avail Journal at availjournal.com. As always, I'm your Avail media host, Virgil Sierra. Muchas gracias. Thank you for connecting with us to learn the art of leadership here at the Avail Podcast.